utter refusal to conform, and your artistic and creative genius. I just feel like more people need to dig deeper beyond the hashtag. You both lived these lives that were so incredible, but they were not make-believe. Like, Julius, how you and Nina Simone both got degrees from Curtis Institute in Philly, and how they rejected her, then gave her an honorary degree later in life, and they accepted you, but wouldn't house you. Fuck them. I just want you, my Black queer ancestors, to know that I am caring for you. I am learning about you and living with you, as in death, as in life. Everything is everything. Thank you for listening. Love, Mayfield.
So in Letters to Marsha, the performance is based on these love notes, and you dance them.
Yeah.
What does that look like? What does that feel like? How do you draw inspiration from these written love notes and perform that with your body?
I have a container that is the kind of structure of the improvisation. I always go through the center. I do this dance where my head is the only thing that connects to the wall for most of the dance. I also incorporate some kind of interaction with the audience where I have a conversation with them about ancestors. And then I also use my voice. Like in this next incarnation that I'm doing at Jack, I'm working on a kind of operatic, nonsensical vocal score that is part of the dance. And there's something for me about this next incarnation that I'll perform at Jack that's connected to my childhood, because it'll be my 50th year on this planet.
Happy early birthday.
It feels like such an accomplishment, you know?
It is an accomplishment.
To actually survive, and not just survive, also just play. Like, I feel like one of the incredible kind of things that I get back from dancing, and also, you know, working as a urban farmer, is I get to play. So I don't know if that answered your question, but the dancing is really, I think it's my playtime.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Mayfield.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
And that is the show for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like Glitter and Doom, a reminder that it also exists in podcast format, and there are elements in the podcast that you can only hear there, so find it wherever you listen.
Dum down, daddy, 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 da down, daddy, 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 da down, da do dee, dum down, da dum dee, dum down, daddy, 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 da down, daddy, 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 you guys are good. Da do dee, dum down, da do dee, dum down, daddy, 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 da down, daddy, 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 da down, da do dee, dum down, da dum dee, dum down, daddy, 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 da down, daddy, 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 da down. Aaron said, listen to Sade, sip on a Cabernet, take the scissors, snip away the lies you told this night. Transition you tried to, the 3 A's they lied to you. Time to start anew, and Bill ain't here to stop you. Reluctant she helped you, not hesitant to tell you that she loves you, but your hair's her pride and joy. But Bill up and left you, so snip goes the scissors. The lies drop one by one, the truth can feel the sun foresee. Shake on you till noon. You may break a pick or two. My Marlins excite you, your amazement's asinine. I curl just to please you, I perm to appease you. I broke ends to build you, my mind is now aligned for sea. Shade comes you till noon. You may break a pick or two. I love you, adore you, foresee. Then I will fly on you, while the bend and dare I tame you. May you reign forever, ever. Almost change you, burn edges to tame you. Every 6 weeks to thin you, forgetting that I'm such stuff dreams are made on, and life is born from. Dare to believe that I am enough. You are enough. Foresee. Shade comes you till noon. You may break a pick or two. I love you, adore you, foresee. Then I will fly on you, while the bend and dare I change you. May you reign forever, ever. May you reign, may you reign, you Shade comes you till noon. You may break a pick or two. I love you, adore you, foresee. Then I will fly on you, while the bend and dare I change you. May you reign forever, ever.
The power of flowers are amazing. It really breaks isolation to give the gift of beauty to somebody. It doesn't have to be somebody who is in a healthcare center. It can be anybody that hasn't had the opportunity to have some reinforcement in their lives. I'm Caroline Gates Anderson. I'm the founder of Bloom Again Brooklyn. Bloom Again Brooklyn, it upcycles flowers. It goes from the very beginning of flowers that were going to be trashed. They weren't going to be used because they had nowhere to put them. There was no place to donate them to. And that's where it all started. The next step was to figure out what the second life was for flowers. And so we started out with going over to Cobble Hill Healthcare Center 4 years ago and asked them if they thought that their residents might like an interaction with volunteers. When we talked about who would you like to visit us and who would you like to work with, they always said, young people, please.
This is an ICT class, which means that some of our children are special needs children and some are in the general education population.
Everybody is going to get one picture. You are making an arrangement for a person who might not get flowers all the time and who is older, and it really makes a difference when you bring beautiful flowers into somebody's room.
A few summers ago, I heard about Bloom Again Brooklyn through social media. I think it was New York Cares had a little piece with some photographs of people helping out with flowers, and I thought it'd be a great fit for our third graders.
Fun story, one of the seniors that lives at Cobble Hill Healthcare is named Mary Zagami, the principal of PS 29, a very long time ago. And she's thrilled that you all are making an arrangement for her, as are the other seniors. She reached out to us at one point to see if we could come in and work with the children, because the children can really relate.
What does it mean to be an agent of change?
Well, one of the things it means is doing the right thing even when nobody asks you. Those people don't normally get flowers.
Being agents of change doing it, and we're helping them to say, you can still go, you can keep on going with your life.
Exactly, yes.
All right, so we're going to call you by table, I think, to come over to get some flowers to make for your arrangements.
We got emails from parents just saying they cannot wait. They're so excited to come to school to make flowers tomorrow for the senior citizens. So it's something they've been really, really excited to do.
I really wanted something sunny since spring is coming. So I tried to make it look as bright as I could.
Our school, our kids always write letters to everyone, said, I hope you are making flower arrangements for senior citizens because you need to be agents of change.
This is to Mary from me. So I did this so these people could feel better really soon.
So we knew then that we were onto something really great, and it's something that the kids held on to throughout the year.
Thank you very much, all of you from PS 29, from Lynn Manna's class. The residents at Cobble Hill Healthcare Center right across the street are really waiting for these arrangements. We're going to distribute them today. We're going to give them the cards today and tell them a little bit about how you did it. We have photographs of you all, and they are really you're gonna bring some sunshine in. You have made a difference. You have become an agent of change.
It's a gift that you give them that we appreciate so much.
Well, thank you to the Bloom Again volunteers, because they are what makes this run. I think the aha moment for me with Bloom Again Brooklyn was that it was not only about the recipients, but it was also about the team building with our own team. And if we didn't have a team at Bloom Again Brooklyn, we wouldn't have an organization. See it as working with all sorts of organizations to enhance their missions. We enhance our mission.
Hi, how are you? One small one there.
Hi, we met before.
Yes, you.
How are you?
All
Which
right.
one do you want? To help people have an enhanced life that have had some tough times. Flowers are for everybody.
I was just gonna say, what about this one?
That's nice.
This is pretty good, right?
Very.
Yeah?
They're really food for the soul. I mean, they really feed the souls. And I think that the residents, the way in which they look forward to them every week with the volunteers visiting with them, feel the same way. Hi, Mary, how are you? So these are flowers for you, made by the children of your old school, PS 29. They made some cards. Kamari at PS 29 said, Happy Spring. Mary Zagami, I made this for you so you are feeling better, Kamari.
Oh, that's a nice card.
Happy Spring. It's been a real privilege to work within the community with both Cobble Hill Healthcare Center and PS 29. And it really is uplifting for both the children and the seniors.
Make these motherfuckers out of this money to throw this free ball in this big venue and give out prizes and trophies and awards. Ooh. Clap. This is the maker of Black Pride, the creator of the Heritage Ball.
I do it all. I do it all.
Bizarre.
My name is Lee Soldier Simmons. I am a visual artist, dancer, promoter, and the executive director of New York City Black Pride.
Hey, everybody. everybody. Make some noise. Happy Black Pride. Now we're going to do it one more time. I said Happy Black Pride. Y'all know what it is. You know the Heritage Ball. Tonight is your night to make a moment, to have a moment. Are y'all ready to do that tonight?
Ballroom is a microcosm of society at large. Ballroom now is made up of all different types of people, gay, straight, white, black, every nationality, every age sector of the group.
Y'all know what I'm talking about? You ready for a moment?
You got a girl from Tiny Mountain?
I have got a girl whose is so good. If you threw it up in the air, 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 it would turn into sunshine. I have got a girl. I have got a girl.
Show me what you got.
Hi, my name is Precious Ebony, and tonight we're here in New York City for the biggest ball in New York City. It's called the Heritage Ball. It's a free ball. Everyone's here to have excitement. Everyone's here to compete, have fun, acknowledge, give homage, pay respect. Everyone's here for the heart, the love, and the history of ballroom. And we're gonna have fun. There's gonna be drinks. There's gonna be some drama. I hope you guys are here. Stay tuned and be alert because it might happen tonight.
All right. I want to say a few words. Every year, it takes a lot to raise money for Black Pride here in New York. It takes a lot for me to do this so that all of the events are free. You don't go to anybody else's Black Pride, that all of the events are free except New York City. Can I have a round of applause for that?
When I came to the ballroom scene, immediately I felt like I was a part of something. Just the warmth of that took me by surprise. I walked into a ball not knowing anybody, and all of a sudden I had an instant family.
Family coming together and using these categories to represent themselves. You have your mother, you have your father, and those are the people that represent you with these houses when you go out and compete for your category. There's several different categories. You have your film queen, which is your transgender women who go out and vogue. You have your butch queens, which are the feminine boys. And you have your butch queen twisters, which you're still real and you still can vogue. Now they're opening up the category for women, cis women to vogue, which is amazing.
I came to the ballroom scene in 1986, so it was before we really began to have a wider public acknowledgement. Also, surprise, surprise, I'm white. I was not your typical member of the ballroom community, but I came to the balls and I was accepted. I became a member of a house, I became a member of the ballroom community, and as we've seen it continue to grow and embrace all different people all over the world, it's really amazing to see how it's grown.
My name is Labelina Milan from the Royal House of Milan, and I'm at the Heritage function today to judge. For the voguers, the 5 elements are critical. Your spins, your dips, your hands, catwalk, floor performance, duck walk. I'm looking for all of that. If you're missing an element, you're not going to get my vote. For the fashion categories, absolutely a tailored look. It has to look like it fits you well. I don't need any waves like you're in the Pacific Ocean. I don't need any ruffles. I just like a nice, clean look, and it can't be fraudulent. First and foremost, it's important for the LGBT community because this is a segment of that community that is often criticized, marginalized. We've been segregated, and yet they take our talent, they take our fashion, they take our dance moves, and they take it into mainstream, and they don't credit the people they need to credit. In general, just in the community in general, the talent itself, it's what you see on the stages, it's what you see on the runways of Paris and Milan and New York. It's ballroom. They just won't give the credit to ballroom.
This is our heritage. Who we are is nothing to apologize about. So clap your hands in celebration. Well, the scene started because Crystal LaBeija kicked the motherfucking doors open and said she will not deal with the pageants anymore.
Crystal, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for the third runner-up in the 1967 Nationals.
She will not deal with that situation anymore. She will not be judged amongst those girls anymore. And she stormed out.
Krista, where are you going? This is not the time to show temperament. Get back here and stay with the other finalists. Oh, well, you've got to expect
Here was
more.
this woman, Crystal LaBeija, who had been walking balls and also participating in this fledgling pageant drag scenes. It was all part of the sub-drag culture.
Do you think she deserved it?
There's a famous documentary film that documented this moment in time where Crystal just had enough of the racial divide of how she looked, makeup, and, you know, and losing in this particular competition.
Monique, would you tell her why you didn't come? Because she knew it's Victor Holler. She said, Crystal, darling, don't go. Because you're not going to get it. And that's why all the true beauties didn't come. It's in bad taste and you're showing your colors and stuff. I am doing it bad, but I have a right to show my color, darling. I am beautiful, and I know I'm beautiful.
Nervous, move to the side. Let me win, I will get my tens. Pump to the side, I get nervous. Won't you go to the side, just move. I get nervous, move to the side. I'll get 10, bitch, let me win. Won't you move to the side. I'll get nervous, I'll get 10. Won't you let me walk, I'll win. Let me walk, I'll get my 10. Move to the side, just let me go. I can't take this, no, so no. Don't you move.
We often don't connect it, but it's the whole reason why there are Black Prides. It's that, you know, these are trans people of color who started these movements. These are trans people of color who were fed up and decided to fight.
I always knew that I was a woman inside, but growing up in my family, I had to put that on hold because I had to be somebody else for everybody else. As I got older and got wiser and realized that, you know, I can be comfortable in my own skin and live my truth. I started living in my truth 7 years ago. After, you know, my drug addiction and my alcohol abuse and the attempt of committing suicide. And when I failed at suicide, that's when I realized that God came to me and said, no, I'm not ready for you, my child. I need you here to live your truth and tell your truth and speak to other people about your truth.
It was these trans people that walked in their truth that risked themselves being arrested, that risked themselves being shot with all types of medications and things because it was considered a mental illness. And these things who stood in their truth to stand up to the police and corruption and say enough is enough.
Years ago, you know, when we started back in the late 70s, early 80s, it was very underground, it was very niche, it was really something very few people knew about. Today, it's really recognized globally. You have people participating in voguing and ballroom events all over the world, and it started here. It started right here in New York City with this community, and that we get to celebrate that, and we continue to get to show the world that celebration is really amazing. It's a really important cultural event.
Are they in the building?
In terms of a historical perspective, it's great to see that the ballroom scene has really been embraced by the larger culture of people of color, by Black Pride. So it's no longer an underground niche thing, but it's really part of the larger culture that we all live in and all experience today. And an event tonight that's a real affirmation of that. The acceptance that we have, the cultural influence that the ballroom community has had.
There is no ball without music, and you have some of the top amazing DJs who put these beats together. We call it rap. It's called commentating in the ballroom scene. You commentate over that beat, and that person who's voguing can hit every beat that they're saying.
Looking for my legend. Looking for my legend. I'm legendary. I'm looking for my legend. Yeah, look at my legend.
Come on, legend.
Looking for my legend.
Legend for a reason, not for a season. Bitch, now give it to me now. Ow, give Amari a round of applause. Legend.
See a bitch, let it all out.
Damn.
Bring it back on a count of 3.
World.
1 for the ready, 2 for the set. DJ. Let it all out. 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 Bitch, let it all out. 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 Bitch, let it all out.
The voice purpose of ballroom is about coming together as a community, lessons that society can learn about being able to create a house that has someone that's straight, someone that's trans, someone that's non-binary, someone that's gender non-conforming, and all to be in something that's considered to be like a family or a house, can show the greater society how we can get along and work together and thrive together. Ballroom has a lot to teach the world.
Somebody need to tell her that she need to quit. I wanna see a bitch let it all out. DJ, drop the beat. Let it all out. 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 Bitch, let it all out. 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 Bitch, let it all out. 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 Bitch, let it all out. 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 Bitch, let it all out. Let it all out. Let it all out. Bitch, let it all out. Let it all out. Let it all out. Let it all out. Let it all out.
In an area already bustling with Haitian pride, this piece of paper makes it official.
For a blink moment in time, people are aware of what they're feeling every day.
If you're going to restore and sustain a democracy, there must be an informed and engaged citizenry.
I spent 2 years in immigration detention. You know how much they spent to feed me for one whole day?
How much?
75 cents.
Immigrants as a whole, migration as a whole, is associated with lower rates of crime. Immigrants make our communities safer.
What causes climate change, the selling and burning of fossil fuels, benefits most the power elite. And so they have a disincentive to address it, and they have an incentive to deny it.
They're not going to funnel more money into our schools. They're not going to do it unless they have to, right? And the way they have to is by our participation, our organization, us taking accountability for our actions.
Dream of the things you'll never know. Oh, dream of the beauty within your soul. George Floyd! When you dream, dream slow. Take the time to let dreams grow. Just dream, just dream, just dream.
Hello, we are live. It is 7 o'clock right now in Brooklyn, USA. And in a few seconds, you may hear the sounds of my neighbors cheering and banging pots to thank the first responders who have been doing so much and deserve all the adulation that we can throw at them. That is the new normal as we sit here right now. Things are different, but as much as they are, some things are still the same. Thousands of you have crossed the doors at BRIC House, and tonight you're in your house, and so am I, and so are the people I'm going to introduce you to in just a moment. This is the BRIC Be Heard Town Hall, the foreseeable future. We're going to be talking to some people who make it their business to project ourselves and our culture into the future. In some instances by 50 or 100 years. But right now, we're challenging them to live in the most provocative space of the future, the foreseeable future, the next 12 to 24 months as they will go down here in Brooklyn and around the world. So some of you may be wondering, just what is it that a futurist does? Well, one quick explanation that helped me to get to an understanding that I might be disabused of when we talk to some actual futurists tonight is this: a three-headed answer. So historians are concerned with the study of the past. Journalists are making the reporting and showing us what's happening in the present. And futurists are people who are gathering information, analytics, and stories to tell us about where we may be going. To that service, we're going to get in some stories tonight, and we're also going to listen to some presentations by some folks that are frankly pretty smart on health, the economy as it pertains to jobs, education, infrastructure, and culture. It's a lot to talk about, and we're going to rock with you for an hour now, and I'd like to introduce you to the people who are going to be helping us. This is the foreseeable future. We're going to be talking with Greg Tate first, and Mr. Tate is joining us from Harlem. We're going to be talking with him about culture. Peter Bishop is joining us from California, where he'll be talking about education. Heather McGowan is coming to us from Massachusetts and will be informing us about the future of work. Dr. Jonathan Metzel is coming all the way from his kitchen in Brooklyn. All right, BK. And finally, Cindy Frewen is coming to us from Kansas City, and she's going to be speaking about infrastructure. So this is one part of the town in the town hall. The other part is, of course, you. So this is the moment when I'm going to encourage you to be in dialogue with us as if we were back in Brick House and I was running around with a microphone, except this time you'll be able to type your questions and direct them at our presenters, who will be coming to us in 5-minute presentations that they pre-recorded earlier. And once those presentations are done, I'll have a little time with them before bringing everyone into the room for a large discussion with all of your questions throughout. So we're going to begin at the beginning with culture and a presentation by Greg Tate.
I guess the question before us is the future of culture, the Afro future of culture. I have a baseline definition of culture, which is simply what people do. From an anthropological perspective, that's what you're looking at. It's like, what have people been doing to define themselves in the world as a group, as a tribe, as a village, as a nation, as a block, as a neighborhood, as a corner. And I think that if we're looking at this whole question of post-pandemic, what is it going to become? I mean, that's an assumption that there is a post-pandemic that doesn't take into account, even if we're talking about a reduction in the number of infections and number of fatalities, we're going to be talking about the culture of grieving, the culture of mourning, of remembrance. Because here in New York, it's very interesting. You're very sensitive to the fact that you're living in a parallel universe, or in a place that has parallel universes. There's such wide discrepancy between how this pandemic is being experienced by those in shelter, those in quarantine, and then those who are on the medical front lines. And then there are the essential workers who have to put themselves forth into the world every day. In this situation where they're exposed to a very nasty, vicious, thirsty, hungry virus, they have to do the opposite in some cases of what everybody else is being told to do in terms of exposure to sociality. So you're also looking at there's a culture of PTSD of trauma that's going to be a part of what we do as a nation, as a village, as a tribe, as a corner in this that has to be factored in. In terms of the expressive arts, we're slowly starting to see how people are using the mediums we have at hand. There's Zooms and Instagrams and Snapchats and Twitches and so forth. D Nice has brought to us this whole notion of club quarantine, which is turned into like quite a global club. It's quite a rave online, and so people have shown that the technology and the degree to which it allows a certain amount of call and response and interactivity is bringing a whole new notion of club into the crib, into the quarantine, sheltered domicile, and this capacity people have to kind of share themselves experiencing this kind of global group rave moment, says something about our adaptability to these new circumstances, So, and, it's like when we talk post-pandemic, there's just so many levels to that because it makes assumptions about testing and tracing and the organized, sane or rational government response in different places in the world, right? And in America, it's just so disturbing that there's so much denial going on. At the same time, it's like bodies are like, piling up in the hospitals, and the mortuaries and the mass graves out there on Hunt's Island, and the numbers that people know from other parts of the world, but there's a thing we call American exceptionalism. I call it American self-deceptionalism, where there's such a bubble of privilege and entitlement and kind of feigned innocence around what's going on anywhere outside of people's immediate circumference. And so you have this pandemic, which is moving in the areas, it's kind of slouching towards, the Midwest and, the cornfield states, of America. And that's changing, this culture of denial, this culture of deceptionalism as well. So, all these things are on deck as we move forward. But I feel at the same time that what artists are going to do with their empathic capacities and their prophetic, generative, expressive capacities is give us a sense of how magnificent human beings can be when they share their gifts for saying what can't be said through ideology, what can't be said through journalism, when they use their psychic telepathic abilities to kind of reach us on these deeper inner spiritual levels, so that we're really in touch with, our most kind of enlightened and cosmically and socially connected selves.
That was Greg Tate, All right, we're back. That was Greg Tate, the renowned cultural critic, producer, musician, and authorian on the Afrofuture and Afrofuturism. So knowing all of that and what you're bringing in the perspective, Greg, I'm wondering how the future of right now and the foreseeable future, especially for folks of color, may intersect with the notions that we've all developed about Afrofuturism?
Well, I think that I've been thinking a lot about Black people's powers of invention and reinvention, and this whole the whole place of conjuration in the culture, you know, of bringing together one's expressive capacities, one's pursuit of magic in execution, in expression, to really elevate your community, your audience, your spectators, you know, and I think, you know, everyone is caught in a kind of limbo or kind of lurch, trying to figure out, well, how do I take this gift that I have that is so much defined by how I interact with folks in social space, you know, or how they interact with the work. What in the foreseeable future can be an altered, you know, adapted platform that has the same kind of efficacy, you know, the same ability to create call and response, the same ability to do what, you know, we see D Nice doing. You know, how do you translate that to other mediums, you know, while we're all in this purgatory? And you know, I'm pretty confident, you know, given the astronomical degree of creativity there is in this city in particular, that we're going to see some very novel responses to, you know, the time of pandemic, that kind of perform in-runs around kind of the sterility of our teleconferencing.
Well,
you
to
know,
that end, I just today on the news, I just saw some artists who are going around and writing graffiti that is artwork, aerosol art, not like the bad old days that some might think of, on these
writing as we call it.
You know, the color and the art lives in New York, even if we're confronted with plywood. Thank you for bringing that perspective. I can't wait to see you in concert with the folks who we're gonna meet just now, but we definitely appreciate you, Mr. Tate, and stick around for our question and answer. And I want to encourage everyone who's watching right now that you can get in on the discussion a la our old town halls by going to the YouTube channel and submitting a question. And I'm going to be looking at those and asking them all night as we move on. So I'm going to pivot right now. Greg was talking about the interconnectedness and the layers of culture in the city and the ways that we're going to interact. And that blends beautifully into the next person I'm going to introduce you to. Dr. Cindy Frewen is a futurist as well as an architect, and she teaches the Designs Future Workshop and Social Change at the University of Houston. She's also a primary in her own architectural firm and provides some strategic foresight. So Dr. Frewen, thank you for joining us tonight. And now we're going to hear her presentation on infrastructure.
So when it comes to long-term thinking about cities, we actually have to divide it up in a couple of different eras. And what we call those is three horizons. And these are three different kinds of scenarios, three different ways of thinking about the future. The first one that I think about is the longest term, and that's sort of the blue skies, and it's called the third horizon. Then there's today's thinking, and that is the first horizon. That's what we're doing to make, you know, ends meet, what we're doing to survive today. And with COVID, that's been totally disrupted. In between is the second horizon, which are the strategists, the ideas that link and bridge the first and the third horizon. During the concept of a pandemic, we actually are transforming the future, and we just don't know it. Healthcare, we've been talking about economics. Today, I'm thinking about cities, and they are accumulation of all of those different things. That creates a system. A system means that there's interlocking dynamic parts, and when there's interlocking dynamic parts, change is not on a linear, change is in emergent, and it comes about in ways that are unexpected and unpredictable, and most importantly, uncertain. Innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. Maybe we're sheltering at home, but we're more connected than ever in many ways. So you have to look at both the good side and the bad side. And one of the good things has been this slowing down, getting in touch with our families, getting in touch with our neighbors, people that are near us. And some places have allowed that, have enabled it better than others. Cities change really slowly. I have to say, even if you're thinking about immediate plans, that can take 25 years to actually come to fruition. It takes a long time for a building cycle. And so I like to think in terms of 2,500 and 2,100, a 50 and 100-year plan. The long view gives you a chance to incorporate a lot of different possibilities. The digital, the AI futures have sped up. Technology has sped up tremendously. So how can you change your lifestyle to use the screens? In fact, I'd say my safest mask, and yours too, is this screen. I don't have to wear a mask at this time. This is the safest place for me to be. How can the city be automated? Think about how it's getting automated. I've seen pictures of people that of senior living facilities in Belgium where they have little robots with the iPads on the face of them, and it's the family on the iPad being sent around the visiting with the person that lives there. How do you get in touch? How do you use the screens to get in touch with people? We'll use that innovation to create a new future. It's very possible that there's a number of facilities that are going to be empty after this. How do those get reused? Are they just going to be these 70-story vacant buildings? Or are you going to be looking at, and as the warehouses have been and now become housing, what are you going to do with the buildings that end up no longer being useful the way they were? I really believe that we have had industrialized cities forced upon us that we do not need anymore. And this is an opportunity that we rethink how they work in order to make it more functional and less of a stress on our lives. Industrial era is that we use things for consumption. This has been an era of consumption. And in fact, you can change that around for production. How do you make your life into a place that's producing? Whether it's food or things? You've seen it with the masks. How can you make a place that's more environmentally conscious, whether that's energy or saving water, or using rainwater, and becoming more of a producer than a consumer? How do you make community spaces more safe and more useful and more beautiful? The parks, the sidewalks, the streets. These workplaces, think about whether or not you really need to be in the workplace, or how can you share without contaminating? We've had online doctor's appointments. We're having curbside doctor's appointments. What if waiting rooms end up being in your vehicle or at the bus stop? What if in fact you're no longer going inside the waiting rooms because they're no longer safe? What are we wearing? That's the next level that you're reaching out. What are our houses like? What are our neighborhoods like? What are our cities like? And finally, what is your position in the online global world? Because in fact, as everybody's been going online, you have an opportunity. There's many opportunities for new voices and new people to emerge. And that's what's happened. Leadership and vision create change in cities. If we in fact are full of urgency, but it's urgency for today, but instead we parlay it into urgency for long term, so that in fact it's purposeful action. The things that we're doing are purposeful, then you have a message, then you have a place at the table, and that's how you create new voices.
So I'm back, and we're welcoming Dr. Cindy Frowen into the room all the way from Kansas City. So we have an interesting question about infrastructure and looking at the ways that we may ourselves come back. If New York City is really defined in a lot of ways by the concentration of its people and its street life, is there a way that the city is going to come back in a way that is open and not going to be resistant to a change in culture? Doctor, looking at the way that New York is so concentrated and people are thick, what's the quickest way to build ourselves back into society?
I think what you're asking is, will our cities fit this new way of a safer but still connected world? And how do we feel comfortable and safe enough to go out into the world without rebuilding everything? And the first line of defense has got to be science. I have great faith that they will cure this with a vaccine, but we do have a 2 to 3 or even 5-year period that the city itself, or our lifestyles, our choices, our behavior make a difference. So New York is so dense, and some people like to say, well, that's just not going to work anymore, it's not safe. I would disagree, because I think we have to learn, and children are better at learning this than adults, certainly older adults are better. They're better at immediately saying, hey, don't go close to each other. They're better at saying, we have to stay apart like this, and they'll correct us. And that means that we have to learn new behaviors, and because people do desire social lives, and we desire being near each other, and we do better when we're near each other. We are more creative when there's a density. We are more innovative. We do more things. We have more, to use the term magic, we have a better society because we're closer together. In most cases, of course, there's a downside of that as well. But I think that we're going to have to readjust because of it. And there's so much unused space in the city. I believe that we can still do it. We for every place that we are sitting, there's probably 7 or 10 other places that we could be that are empty while we're sitting here. And so if we can just resort how we're using everything, then things will start to make sense again and still be safe.
Safe and working. Thank you for that. We'll be speaking with you very soon. Thanks, Doctor. So I'm going to now turn to another doctor who is in Brooklyn, but he makes his way down to Tennessee a lot. Where are you? Dr. Jonathan Metzel, come on into the room and let the folks see you. He's a professor of sociology and medicine, health, and society, and the director for the Center for Medicine, Health, and Society at Vanderbilt University. And he made this presentation for us on the future of healthcare.
Hello, Brooklyn. I'm Jonathan Metzel. I'm the director of the Center for Medicine, Health, and Society at Vanderbilt University, and also, believe it or not, a Brooklyn resident. I've been through the pandemic here in Clinton Hill, and like everyone, the idea of imagining a future that is beyond the pandemic sounds great, because then we can imagine what's coming next. I'm a doctor and a sociologist, and my work looks at race and infrastructure and healthcare. And I've really been thinking a lot over the course of this pandemic about the problems that got us into this horrible situation and about how things can change when we come out of it. I think one of the main issues, of course, is that all of the countries in the world right now are facing the same problem, this same coronavirus. And it's been interesting for me to look around the world at the ways that different societies deal with this, and the ways that some societies do better and others do worse. I will say that one of the most important factors is a functioning healthcare system, right? People have access to healthcare, people have access to treatment, and that it's an equitable healthcare system. So it's not just that wealthy people can get to the doctor, but other people can't. So number one is I'm hoping that we can learn that lesson. I know that that's been in the air, questions of Medicare for all and other factors like that, whatever you want to call it. But I would say that this pandemic has highlighted the profound inequality of access to healthcare that really is a risk factor, just like the virus itself. So number one is that I hope we come out of this with a much more equitable healthcare system. I think we see the downside of not doing that, which is not only, of course, the very disparate rates of illness and death that we have right now in this country. Minoritized populations, low-income populations are dramatically more at risk. And so I just think that that is an unsustainable system, an unsustainable framework for our country. And so, first of all, I hope we come out of this with a much more equitable healthcare system. The second part that I think we've recognized, again, given the profoundly incommensurate rates of death in in particularly African American and Latinx populations, is that this illness is not just a medical illness. It's also a social illness. It's also a political illness, because the people who are at risk now, it's not like they're biologically at risk. It's not like there's some kind of genetic reason they're at risk. They're at risk because they live in an insecure housing situation, or a very dense housing situation. They have jobs where they have to go out and put themselves at risk being in particular kinds of jobs. They live in neighborhoods that have infrastructure that has not been adequately taken care of. And so I think the other issue is we've got to fix these kind of social inequities in this country. And of course, that is horrific and deadly for people who live in low-income areas. As we're seeing here, the virus really preys on social infrastructure that has not been taken care of. And I think we need a dramatic national effort to address that infrastructure. But also, look at this virus, look at this pandemic. The virus keeps spreading until we put it out in everybody, right? And so it's also important for the country that we address these social inequities. So number two is to address the underlying social issues. And of course, we've seen that particularly in places like Brooklyn, where the people who were already at risk before the virus become more at risk afterwards. And number three, I think one great thing about New York is solidarity. And I think part of achieving the first 2 points is linked to point number three, which is, I think, the solidarity that the city has shown in many ways compared to other parts of the country has been remarkable in some ways. And I think that in a way, what can we do to encourage solidarity among people, between networks? And I'm hoping that will be one of the resonant points from this pandemic, because I think what we've realized is, believe it or not, and this is a wake-up call for a lot of people to show just how interconnected that we all are. We're all in the same networks, even though there, of course, are a lot of economic disparities that need to be addressed. But public transportation and food delivery networks, things people never thought about before. So I think what can we do to bolster solidarity would be I think another important factor. I think information going forward is going to need to be reconfigured. I just personally think, I'm somebody who studies race, and I feel like dismayed that the voices of medical authority, of public health authority, which have their own problematic histories of race and racism in this country. But at a time like this, there's such a hunger for just what's the right information, what's the right treatment, what's the right practice. Should I stand 6 feet away from somebody? Should I wear a mask? And I feel like those messages have been so easily co-opted by divisive messages. And so I think that in a way, fixing the kind of information infrastructure, creating ways that information is democratic, particularly health information, fixing the ways that the voices of communities can be heard, and that there can be kind of a more democratic way to get out trusted information, not just about health and illness, but also about the structural factors that I was talking about earlier. I guess just as a doctor, the last point I would say is that I think that there really needs to be a reckoning about race and racism in medicine. I think this two-tiered healthcare system that we have is a result of misplaced values in the healthcare system itself. And so really bringing to bear all the great anti-racist work that's been done by Ibram Kendi and other people, or people who critique what sociologists call kind of racial capitalism, really thinking very hard about what would it mean to have a truly racially equitable healthcare system, public health system. I think that would be an important move, for an important stance for medicine, just given, again, the disparate rates of death that have happened here, and really what those reflect about the society that we've created. I think, maybe that sounds pie in the sky, but I would say that I've been, believe it or not, we've been doing these webinars here from Brooklyn about what's called structural competency, this new way that we can bring medicine together with public health, with critical race studies. And we've had thousands of people show up, doctors, nurses, healthcare workers from across the world, really, because I think, medical workers are tired of this system as well. And so I do see that from this moment of pain, from this moment of despair, there really is a possibility for recreating change. I guess finally, I'll say that there are a lot of just practical matters, that would be involved in creating structural change that's more equitable. Think about, for example, telemedicine right now, this idea that we're going to be seeing our doctors over the internet. Well, everybody needs the internet in that case. Food distribution, some communities are really struggling to get food more than others. How can we fix the food networks, access to pharmaceuticals, things like that? So I would hope that what we come out of this is a much more resilient system, and one that doesn't leave us quite as vulnerable. And finally, just a note of thanks to everyone in my community here in Brooklyn and in Brooklyn more broadly. Really, the power of feeling everyone kind of going through this together in different ways has been, I think, one of the more empowering aspects of this horrible pandemic.
A lot to digest there, Dr. Metzel, and we're going to mix it up. Some great questions came in during your presentation, but just in the spirit of moving things along, I'm going to ask you a yes or no question, as we're halfway through our time right now on the foreseeable future. So I want to ask, in that spirit of solidarity that you spoke about, do you think that this pandemic is the moment where this is going to be the before and after, where folks do come together? Short answer.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. We'll digest a little more later. Right now, we're going to something that is very foremost in a lot of people's minds right now, as we're a few weeks away from the first of the month, the future of work. Heather McGowan is one of the foremost experts on the future of work and where it is that we're going, and she prepared this presentation.
Hi, my name is Heather McGowan. I'm going to give you a quick overview of how I see the future of work. So how I see the future of work, I've really codified in this book that recently came out with my co-author Chris Shipley, called The Adaptation Advantage, which Thomas Friedman from the New York Times generously wrote the foreword.
So we're at home.
So we are having the greatest leaps in human longevity at the same time that we're having the greatest velocity of change, primarily driven by technology. So for example, if you were born back when the steam engine came out, life expectancy was 37. So you had 2.5 generations to absorb the impact of that paradigm shifting change. Fast forward to today, life expectancy closer to 90, 2, 3, 4, 5 different paradigm shifts within a single generation, depending on your age. We're not prepared for that. This velocity of technology-driven change is accelerating, whereas it's meeting this tension with human adaptation, which has long been linear and at a slower pace. Although a couple of months ago, something came into play, the coronavirus, which I think is actually an accelerant to our digital transformation, which is really human transformation. And if you zoom in on that, it's really only been 57 days since the World Health Organization declared it a global pandemic. And in that 57 days, and in fact, really in the first 2 weeks, we've made dramatic changes about how we work, where we work, who works, and what we do. The World Health Organization declared it a global pandemic on March 11th. So on March 10th, we've moved from as many people working from home as possible, which could be anywhere from 29% to 30% of our workforce. Work becomes dangerous for people for whom it wasn't dangerous before. Restaurant workers, healthcare workers, grocery store workers, and delivery drivers now put their life in their hands, bus drivers. Companies have rapidly pivoted what they do, product lines from alcohol and perfumes to hand sanitizer, from fashion to personal protective equipment, from cars to ventilators. We have reworked processes, remapped supply chains. Any parent out there, my God, you're now a full-time teacher. That is a tremendous amount of work. And leaders out there managing teams now have established trust and psychological safety for their teams to be successful working remotely. And visionary CEOs who are heads of companies that for one reason or another can't operate their business right now have said, wait a second, what are we good at and where's the need and how quickly can we pivot? That is a tremendous amount of adaptation in a very, very short period of time. And what we're coming out of is what I call the old promise, where education, career, and retire existed in discrete bands. Whether you went to university or not, was the first third of your life sufficient only to get you on the career ladder, collect a pension, and by design die a year later. Success measures here to be codify and transfer the right predetermined skills and existing knowledge in you to get you on that escalator. Now it looks more like this. Life expectancy may not be 90 yet, but it will be soon. Education becomes learning to imply there's no end state to that. Work becomes leverage of that learning to indicate that work and learning are a combined act. And longevity becomes a reality because we didn't plan for or save for, nor can we afford cognitively or financially a 30-year retirement. And it looks more like this. There's a relationship between our engagements, which could be all within a job, but they're tours of duty where we work on projects over periods of time that integrate learning and leveraging together, remain engaged. And our success measures there are, can we learn, adapt, and create new value continuously? Because I say in the past, we learned once in order to work. Now we work in order to continuously learn. In the past, our identity was bestowed upon us, externally validated, whether it was your trade union, your degree, your title, your company. Some of those things can be taken away from you, where there's more resilience and agility in a self-actualized, internally validated identity connected to your purpose. Because where we are today is we're standing on the edge of a raging river. We've been wandering down a path. It's been great for some, not great for others, but on the edge of the river, this lays bare our inequities as society. And we need to cross this river, but all we can see are the swirling eddies that we think might kill us. And what we fail to see is on the other side of the river, the grass may be greener, the paths may be better. Not only that, we've already started this process of crossing the river. We've flattened the curves. We have adapted rapidly, as I mentioned in the beginning, to different types of where we work and how we work and who works. And we're going to get to the other side where I think things might just be better. So that's how I see the future work in about 5 minutes. And I look forward to having a discussion with you so we can expand on these topics and well as others. Again, my name's Heather McGowan, and that's my quick synopsis on the future of work. Thanks.
And Heather McGowan is with us right now. I'm going to also be very unfair to you and ask you a short question. Some economists have estimated that New York City is set to lose about 1.2 million jobs by the end of this month. Most of them what they classify as low-wage jobs in restaurants, retail, or transportation. How many of those jobs, of the 1.2 million, do you think are going to be lost to the old world versus post-COVID-19?
I have no way of knowing. I don't have a crystal ball, but I am encouraged by the fact that we're no longer calling those low-wage, low-skill jobs, and we're calling them frontline workers and essential workers. I think the virus may very well change our settlement patterns. It's certainly going to change what work looks like, and we need a massive reskilling and upskilling so more people can find meaningful work that aligns with their purpose.
Asked and answered. Thank you so much for that. And we'll be talking to you shortly.
Sure.
Appreciate the emphasis on work in that shifting landscape. And now for our final presentation, here is Dr. Peter Bishop on the future of education.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you here in the BRIC TV town hall in our virtual environment. Not exactly town halls the way we used to have them, but we're learning as we go. My name is Peter Bishop, and I'm a futurist. The title of this is The Foreseeable Future. And as a futurist, I have to tell you that we don't really do predictions about what's foreseeable. We do scenarios because we believe that the future, particularly the long-term future, and indeed the future we're dealing with right now, is highly uncertain. And therefore to say what will happen would be, we believe, incorrect. And therefore I'm going to talk a little bit about what could happen or what might happen. We've got two, we call these the dimensions of uncertainty, and I'll just focus on two because we have a short period of time. First of all, how big will this change be? Will we snap back to education as it was before, or will we actually transform education to a new normal, something that we have never seen before? That's one big question, and we don't know the answer to that. Is it possible to believe in a snapback given the size of this disruption? Well, it's happened before. The most recent one was the 2009 recession. We thought it was the biggest, and it was the biggest downturn in the economy since the Great Depression almost 100 years ago. And yet things returned after a while, and it took some time, but things pretty much returned to normal. And in the last few years before the virus, we had a bigger economy almost than ever before. And so snapback is a definite scenario. It could go back to the way things used to be before. The opposite side, of course, is that this is a transformative event, that this event will change education and enter into a new era, an era that we've not seen before. We hope that may happen because there's a lot of things about the old education system that we didn't particularly like. There was a lot we did like, certainly familiar. We knew how to do it, but we're learning new things. And has that happened before? Well, of course. The biggest example, of course, is the internet, which comes along in the 1990s, does arrive slowly. It wasn't this sudden, but of course, it's a disruption in communication and almost everything we do in education, in life, and business, that has transformed everything. So could we have a transformation after this disruption? Absolutely. So the way we think of this as a futurist, as a continuum, snap back to exactly what it was before? Probably not. Transform to the utopian future of what we all wish it were? Well, probably not that either. Somewhere in between is where the foreseeable future for education is, but we don't know where exactly that in between is. How much snapback, how much transformation. The other big question is whether we like what will occur and be permanently established if there is this new era. Obviously, it could be worse. In other words, we could have an education system that has downsides, in which students who have been out of school for so long, particularly students who need pretty much teacher contact, a lot of teacher contact, they may get behind in their studies and therefore not do as well. School districts which are dependent on state sales tax or property values may see a diminution in their funds, in their resources, and they will have to cut back a great deal as well. And finally, we have the fact that educators themselves might be basically so disrupted by this, is that they snap back they basically recreate the old system. And that is not exactly what we're talking about. Could there be something better? Well, the better may actually be solving some of those conditions and those issues that we really didn't like much before. How disengaged, particularly high school and college undergraduates, were in their studies. How much college students were paying for their college education. And the fact that teachers were still relying largely on textbooks, trying to get across content, information, which now is almost immediately accessible on their smartphones. So how do we summarize these? Well, talking about snapback and the downsides, we know that already. We don't really have to talk about it much. But I think there are two things that are going on today, more or less by requirement, that could change education. The first, of course, is a much greater use of technology. Fundamentally, the only way that teachers and students can interact these days is through technology, whether through Zoom or Google Docs or Google Spreadsheets or however they choose to do it. Now we have required, for at least the rest of this school year and maybe next, a mediated form of communication. That, I think, will force some teachers to reassess how they've used technology in the past. There may be some advantages to mediated communication that they didn't see before. I had a colleague who did her dissertation research on something she called the CAP gap. CAP, K-A-P, knowledge, attitude, performance. She did a survey of community college instructors and asked them how much they knew about information technology in the classroom. Oh, a lot. What did they think of it? Great deal, it's great. How much did they do? Not much at all. A lot of knowledge, a lot of attitude, not much performance. And now we have some more performance. So we could see more and better use of technology in education in the future. The other thing that's required students to do and teachers to allow to happen is more independent learning. Students can't be in touch with a teacher 50 minutes a day. Some are doing very well with that, being more creative, learning on their own, and some obviously not so good. The future, foreseeable future, is that maybe we realize that education is not so much like building a building where you have to do everything. You have to nail all the boards together, mix the concrete and lay it down, put up the walls and the roof, and everything has to be done. It's maybe more like growing a garden or even raising a child, where there is among young people and the rest of us an intrinsic capacity and a desire to learn. The teacher's job, therefore, is not to pour the material into the student's head, but to set up the conditions, like the garden. Once the conditions are set, then learning takes place and the flowers bloom. That would be both of those, I think, very interesting and basically beneficial uses in the future of education. These things are not going to happen by themselves, however. If we are to move in those directions, people who realize the benefits of a good and effective use of technology and giving students more freedom and more ability to create and to create their own learning are two outcomes of this future, preferred future, the semi-utopian future. Is it foreseeable? Well, of course it is, but so are some of the other scenarios. So keep talking about the scenarios, keep talking about stories, keep telling stories, both downsides and upside stories about what might occur. And I look forward to the discussion in the town hall following this presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
So you won't have to wait very long. I'm going to invite each of our panelists to turn on their cameras right now, and let's engage as a community. There was some questions that were pouring in as each of you were, your presentations were being shown. And there was one that is so applicable because there's so many intersections between each of your respective fields and presentations that I wanted to pose to all of you. How can we reach across the, quote, bubbles of privilege to combat structural disparities? And we've seen those disparities come to play with the way we work and the shifting of the language to recognize those folks on the front lines of work. We've seen it come to play in education. We've certainly seen it come to play in terms of health disparities and the built environment. So do I have any takers for how we might be able to reach across that bubble of privilege to really make those changes for the world we want to see post-COVID?
Well, you know, one area we didn't talk about was the future of governance, you know, particularly when we're looking at the most massive collapse, you know, of competent leadership, you know, in managing a crisis that I've probably seen in my lifetime, you know, because of how the way in which our politics now has just degenerated the capacity for coordination, for coherence. And in its place, we get this chaos and helter-skelter and kind of people left randomly to the devices of the competence or incompetence of their local or state governance, right? And and I think it's a very difficult. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, regardless of what your political affiliation or what you think of the respective leadership, wherever you may be, from each of your perspectives, looking at the very near future and further out into that 100, 200 year era span, how much does leadership matter?
Well, governance matters, right? Because you're looking at a situation, you're looking at situations where with the stroke of a pen, the dispensation of human rights and of resources and of wealth redistribution can break down along these kind of toxic partisan lines. Like the people who are the least equipped, the least educated, the least capable of guiding a nation through this crisis are really the ones who have their hands on the wheel, you know? So, and I don't think we figured out a way to address that yet.
I'm thinking Heather and Cindy, looking at the way that we look at the environment right now, and you're talking about infrastructure projects that may take a generation to come to fruition, or these changes that have been accelerated by this virus. Does the person who's leading right now for this blip of time matter, looking at those long range things?
I think some of it is when that blip ends, which I hope is soon, like November, let's be honest. But I think one of the things when it comes to work and more inclusion and more human potential is we've got to move education from being a weight to propellant. We have made education a for-profit business in this country, much like healthcare, to our detriment.
And Cindy, I know you are very concerned with the infrastructure and the built environment, and you said the culture changes before the buildings adapt to us.
So there's really a couple of levels. One is the system level. How do you make change initially? And that has to do with then leadership and getting people together to find the systems level changes that can be made. At the same time, during the conversation of figuring out what to do, that the conversation involves beliefs and values and where there's common ground, where things can be changed in multiple domains simultaneously. That's how you make a system change, is that instead of one big home run, it's a lot of different things on a lot of different levels. And the only way to do that, as you said, is through the leadership and what are the stories that are being told? What are the beliefs that are being impacted? What are the ways that people will change their minds through into a whole new paradigm, into a new shift? I think that you start with the leadership, and the leadership now has been, let's say, confusing at best. And that means that there has been this war almost among the various states and various leaders across domains. How does that instead be put into a cooperative spirit, a spirit of belief that we can find something better out of this? Because there was, in every other case I can almost think of, when we said we had an opportunity for transformational change, in recent years, we haven't been taking it. And that requires this vision, this urgency, which is already built in, and the leadership coming together.
So Dr. Bishop and Heather, this is sort of a double-headed question that came in from someone saying, if presumably this distance education and online and homeschooling is going to be our new normal for the foreseeable future, what kind of ways will work and society have to adapt for folks who have to make money and educating their children and homeschooling?
I think we might have to look at jobs having, flexibility in terms of hours. Like you may be working in the morning for your company, in the afternoon you might be teaching your kids. You might be working early evening for your company, but your company has to understand that your family comes first. And I think that we can get, if we don't have commuting hours, and if we focus on the things that really need to get done, we might be able to get them all in there. But I think back on your point before that about leadership, one of our biggest problems in this country has been a me-we problem. In September, October, you might not have cared if your Uber driver had health insurance or paid sick leave. But in May, you sure do, because their health is your health. And the more we can see the interconnectedness of each other, we might make better me-we decisions. We've got a leader right now who sees the world as a zero-sum game, and he's only winning if somebody else is losing. And that is faulty logic, and we need to get more people to understand that. Like talking about the infrastructure projects being a bunch of small little wins, they all begin with leadership and painting a picture of a world that doesn't exist yet, that has a place for all of us, where we is stronger than any of the individual me perspectives.
Yeah, Brian, the phrase that comes to mind is from John Gardner from the mid-20th century, who said, we are the people we've been waiting for. We really can't wait for some savior, some person to come in or leader to come in. Leaders are absolutely important, but so is everybody else. And what I think of right now is more about community. I don't think Heather's right. I mean, our leadership, particularly in Washington, is all about ourselves, but that's also cultural. They were not elected by a bolt out of lightning. It's that our society has become atomized into a sense of individuals. And that I hear people inching towards a little bit better sense of community. And I think mask wearing is an interesting signal of that culturally, Gregory, that I'm not wearing the mask for me, I'm wearing it for you. I'm signaling that I care about myself, but I also care about you. And if we could approach our schools, our cities, our infrastructure, our healthcare, more as a sense of we are in this together. We are not completely atomized, single, competitive individuals. And we have to simply not be charged, which none of us are, but start acting that way and start electing people and start participating where we can. And I think local politics and state politics is probably the place to start there.
And with the stories we tell.
Dr. Metzel.
Say again.
Well, I would just say that, I agree with everybody that the system we have now is unsustainable. I mean, yesterday, in Chicago, they tried to open a Ford automotive plant, and it was a big reopening, and it stayed open for one day, and then it turned out they didn't protect the workers, and the plant had to close again. So the model of kind of thinking about this two-tiered health network and not protecting everyone adequately, it's just not sustainable. It's not going to work in this model. And so this idea of choosing between health and the economy is you need efficient public health for everyone in order to sustain the economy. And I think that the societies that figure that out are going to come out of this the best in the long run. I think the idea of just throwing people back out there as fodder is not going to work. And so I ultimately think, Trump, among all the failings, is promoting this idea that it's either the economy or health. And I think it's really that binary that is so false, and one that we have to reject, because if we don't start protecting everybody's public health.
Dream of the things you'll never know. Oh, dream of the beauty within your soul. When you dream, dream slow. Take the time to let dreams grow. Just dream, just dream. Just dream.
For a blink moment in time, people are aware of what they're feeling every day.
If you're going to restore and sustain a democracy, there must be an informed and engaged citizenry.
I spent 2 years in immigration detention. You know how much they spent to feed me for one whole day?
How much?
75 cents.
Immigrants as a whole, migration as a whole, is associated with lower rates of crime. Immigrants make our communities safer.
What causes climate change, the selling and burning of fossil fuels, benefits most the power elite. And so they have a disincentive to address it, and they have an incentive to deny it.
They're not going to funnel more money into our schools. They're not going to do it unless they have to, right? And the way they have to is by our participation, our organization, us taking accountability for our actions.
There's going to be a health crisis and there's going to be a food crisis. Who's going to fix it? You look to your left, you look to your right. That came down to us.
These are my good people. We'll be starting in a few minutes.
Before the COVID-19 pandemic, an estimated 1 million New Yorkers went without food. From March to May, that number more than doubled. Some estimate that 40% more New York City residents will face food insecurity this year as a direct result of the economic fallout.
So, Chef, what happens on the corner of Belmont and Watkins on Thursdays?
And we prepare 2,000 cooked meals Monday through Thursdays. But on Thursdays, we have our fresh produce boxes where we distribute to the community.
Come on, you gotta get another wheel, girl. Yeah, we're gonna fix that for you.
Chef Rodney and his business partner LaToya Metters are co-founders of Collective Fare, a culinary training and catering business. When COVID-19 hit New York, they knew they needed to transform.
We are located in Brownsville. It is an under-marginalized community. It's considered a food desert. When COVID struck, my partner, he said, what happens with a community that's in crisis is put into an additional crisis. So we acted immediately and we launched Meals for All BK on March 12th. We were able to scale from the 400 people we were feeding at that time to an additional 8, to an additional 1,000.
We got potatoes, corn, carrots, peppers, sometimes onions to it. I said, no, these are also cooked meals that we offer through Collective Fare. These are ready-to-eat meals. They could heat them up when they get home.
People always hear the negativity about Brownsville as far as the high murder rates, the drug activity, but there's still a good amount of people in Brownsville that's committed to make their community better.
Even when we started in 2016, we thought the issues were telling people how to eat healthy, teaching them how to cook healthy, and finding them jobs. And we thought that would solve a problem. We have since changed. We realized that we need to be that access point. Without people like us on the ground fighting for food justice, things are not going to change in these communities. In Brownsville, you don't get to choose. You only get what is handed to you. And these are the things we need to start to fix.
Getting to choose has always been a key element of increasing food security in Brownsville, where even pre-pandemic, some experts describe the neighborhood as a food swamp, an area with limited access to healthy food and an overabundance of unhealthy options like fast food chains. Systemic inequalities like disproportionately high rates of unemployment, families below the poverty line, and extreme housing burden also make obtaining whatever fresh food is available even more difficult. Local growing is one way to turn short-term aid into long-term food security. And in Brownsville, I met a woman who's been doing the work long before COVID.
I'm Brenda Thompson Duchesne. We're at Green Valley Garden, 93 New Lots Avenue in Brownsville, Brooklyn. We have 5 community gardens, 4 in Brownsville, 1 in East New York. We started in 2000 to grow for the community, 100% nutrient value, fresh and locally grown. Dirt on my nails is my tranquility. Gardening is so peaceful, it has a serenity.
Ms. Brenda founded Isabalia Ladies of Elegance Foundation 2 decades ago as part of her mission to increase access to healthy food in Brownsville.
I want your family to taste the difference between the supermarket and what is really fresh. People like, that grow in Brooklyn, in Brownsville? Are you crazy? We have a high rate of childhood diabetes, obesity, hypertension, cholesterol, because we're not eating properly. If we don't eat healthy, we will not be able to deal with whatever come our way. COVID come, and look how much of us have passed because our immune system was weak.
Diabetes, hypertension, and obesity have all been shown to increase the risk of COVID-19. Ms. Brenda wants her neighbors to know they have other options.
The nearest farmers market was in East New York. A lot of people could not have traveled to East New York Farm, so they settled for the supermarket. Once we started doing this, it was more convenient because it's in your backyard.
It just looks like pale raspberry.
Why do we have to wait till it's gentrified in order to get the best? Yes, we need housing, but just as much as they're taking the land to do housing, you need to do locally grown. We got another year or so of COVID. COVID ain't going nowhere. If you look at the food lines, it's people will have never thought they would have to come in line. So if we can't get the food to import it, how are we going to survive? Why are we not encouraging and teaching our community? Come to the garden, get a plot, grow your own.
We need to start to be our own food czars and our own food advocates in our communities. The only other way that's going to keep me out of business is by learning how to create healthy access to foods within our communities. Then someone like me won't be doing anything really special because everyone will be eating healthy.
What the Lord placed on my heart is to help the community. I can't help everybody, but as much people as I can help, as long as He leave me here and have me here on the earth, then I have accomplished my goal.
This is a community, first and foremost. They survived and they're resilient because these things have happened before. May not have been a pandemic, but they've experienced things before that kind of made them ready and prepared for this.
America has suffered upwards of 220,000 deaths due to COVID-19, more than 23,000 of them in New York City. In Brownsville, Brooklyn, more than 2,200 cases have been reported, and many of those people have sought treatment at Brookdale University Hospital and Medical Center. Brookdale, like the neighborhood around it, has been fighting the pandemic on two fronts: the disease itself and the emotional and psychological damage from the loss of loved ones, the loss of work and wages, and the loss of freedom to just live life normally. But a lot of this stress goes way back.
Intergenerational trauma, where the parents had trauma themselves, the grandparents had trauma, and we're really in the first generation where people are getting a reasonable amount of mental health supports.
Dr. Camille Archer, a child and adolescent psychologist at Brookdale, says a lot of people may not realize that during the height of the pandemic, many of her young patients were waiting at home, uneasy.
This community, I think, has a high percentage of essential workers. And one of the things that I saw a lot with the children here is that they would worry that their parents have to go out to work. And that caused a lot of anxiety and, they fear that their parents are going to get it, that their parents are going to get sick and bring it home to them.
Other reactions to the pandemic varied, depending on how old her patients were.
A lot of conflicts with adolescents and their parents were about, they want to hang out with their friends, they're leaving the house, they can't stay here, this is horrible. But then there's a real subset of children who are anxious, who are being teased or bullied in school, and those kids are so happy they don't have to go to school.
In the spring, Dr. Archer was treating most of her patients remotely. At the same time, Brookdale's emergency room was under intense pressure, according to its chair of emergency medicine, Dr. Sandra Scott.
No one really expected what we experienced. So once it became evident that COVID-19 was on its way to New York City and on its way to America, we started to prepare in the best way that we knew how. So we started to think about surge space. We started to think about